It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo, time for the news bulletin, and we will be starting with the main headlines. Cautious calm spreads over Gaza as Israel approves Donald Trump's plan for the ceasefire. Parts of Kiev plunged into darkness after a mass Russian attack. And Venezuela opposition leader Maria Corina Machado wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Cautious calm spread across the Gaza Strip as the Israeli cabinet approved the U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the release of all the remaining hostages held by Hamas, a key step toward ending the two-year war that had destabilized the Middle East. Under the terms of the deal, Hamas intends to release all the living hostages in a matter of days, while the Israeli occupation military will begin a withdrawal from the majority of Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians began flocking towards North Gaza after the U.S. brokered ceasefire took effect today. Almost all of the Gazan 2.2 million population had been displaced by the Israeli occupation genocide war, which erupted in October of 2023. The Israeli occupation unprecedented aggression killed over 67,000 people, reduced much of the coastal Gaza Strip to vast tracts of rubble, and wrought a humanitarian disaster. Gaza's civil defense agency said that the Israeli forces have begun pulling back from parts of the territory, especially in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. A senior official said that the Israeli forces have withdrawn from several areas in Gaza City. Among the district's troops were withdrawing from والتى and Ashot camp, both of which had seen intense Israeli air and ground operations in recent weeks. He added that the Israeli military vehicles had also pulled out from the sections of the city of Khan Yunis. Israel government spokeswoman said that the Israeli military would be redeployed to the so-called Yellow Line as they gradually withdraw under the plan proposed by the U.S. President Donald Trump. During the first part of the withdrawal process, the military will still hold about 53% of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that the government had approved the framework of the hostage release deal with Hamas as both sides edged closer to ending more than 2 years of hostilities in Gaza. Israel previously said that all parties had signed the first phase of the ceasefire agreement, adding that Hamas freeing the captives would bring the end to the war. The accord in Egypt follows a 20-point peace plan for Gaza announced last month by the U.S. President Donald Trump, who said that he planned to leave on Sunday for the Middle East. Egypt is planning an event to celebrate the conclusion of the deal, with Trump also expected to stop in Israel and consider going to devastated Gaza. In a statement, Netanyahu's office said that the government had approved the framework for the release of all the hostages, both the living and the deceased. The Israeli Justice Ministry published a list of 250 prisoners to be released in exchange for hostages held in Gaza as part of the ceasefire deal with Hamas. The list does not include the names of several senior Palestinian leaders. Israel and Hamas have agreed on the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire and the hostage prisoner exchange deal based on the 20-point plan proposed by the U.S. President Donald Trump. According to the plan, Israel will release 250 prisoners and around 1,700 Gazans detained since the war began. Within the framework of the continuous efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, the 48th Aid Convoy of Zaid al-Izza was launched from Egypt to Gaza. The convoy included trucks carrying 1,600 tons of food, medical and relief aid. The Egyptian Red Crescent said that Egypt had sent more than 580,000 tons of humanitarian and relief supplies during the previous 2 years to Gaza. The United Nations children's charity UNICEF called for all the crossings for food aid into Gaza to be opened, saying that deaths among the children could rise, given their immune systems have been badly compromised. The Israeli occupation forces began pulling back from some parts of the Palestinian territory under the ceasefire deal with Hamas, in the first phase of the initiative by the U.S. President Donald Trump to end the war. The United Nations plans to ramp up the delivery of the humanitarian aid to Gaza, where some areas are experiencing famine in the first 60 days of the ceasefire in the enclave. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that Germany will provide 29 million euros in the immediate humanitarian aid for Gaza following the Israeli ratification of the ceasefire with Hamas group. He said that Germany, together with Egypt, it will invite to a reconstruction conference for Gaza, adding that Germany would assume responsibility in the peace process proposed by the U.S. President Donald Trump. Syrian Foreign Minister Asad al-Shaybani arrived in Lebanon, the first senior official to visit from Damascus since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. The Lebanese National News Agency said that Shaybani was accompanied by the delegation that included the Syrian Justice Minister and would discuss issues including reactivating the Lebanese-Syrian diplomatic relations. Shaybani is set to meet the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, and the Foreign Minister Youssef Raghi. The U.S. imposed sanctions on about 100 individuals, entities and vessels, including the Chinese independent refinery and terminal that helped Iran's oil and petrochemicals trade. The U.S. Treasury Department said that it was the fourth round of sanctions in which the administration targeted the China-based refineries that continue to purchase the Iranian oil. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization military alliance, the NATO, announced that it will be holding the major annual nuclear exercise next week, with an important part of the drill to focus on protecting the weapons before they are ever used. The Steadfast Noon exercise, which starts on Monday, is taking place amid heightened security around the military facilities in Europe due to a series of mysterious drone incidents, some of them blamed on Russia. Steadfast Noon will run for about 2 weeks, and it will be led by the Netherlands and involves about 71 aircraft from 14 NATO countries. Large parts of Kiev were plunged into darkness in the early hours of Friday after Russian drones and missiles struck Ukrainian energy facilities, cutting power and water to homes and halting a key metro link across the Dnipro River. The details follow. Large parts of Kiev were plunged into darkness in the early hours of Friday after the Russian drones and missiles struck Ukrainian energy facilities, cutting power and water to homes and halting a key metro link across the Dnipro River. In the latest mass attack targeting the energy system, as the winter approaches, the electricity was interrupted in 9 regions and around 600,000 households were temporarily without power across the country. A 7-year-old was killed when his home was hit in the southeast, and at least 20 people were injured. For his part, President Volodymyr Zelensky calls for the decisive action from the United States, Europe and the G7 in delivering air defense systems and enforcing sanctions. He reported that Russia had used more than 450 drones and 30 missiles in the latest attack. Ukraine's stretched air defenses are no match for the regular barrages on such a scale. Ukraine's Air Force said that had it downed 405 of 465 drones and 15 of 32 missiles in the attack. Russia said that the overnight strikes were in response to the Ukrainian attacks on the Russian civilian facilities. Ukrainian launches the drone strikes against Russia, focusing on the oil installations, although they are on a far smaller scale. Kiev says it wants to force Moscow, which started the war, to negotiate a peace deal in good faith. Ukrainians are bracing for the tough winter as the full scale nears the 4th anniversary. Russia has intensified the attacks on the energy system in recent weeks, striking power plants and gas production facilities, and the local authorities are struggling with the scale of the repairs required. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Venezuela's opposition leader and democracy activist Maria Corina Machado. Jørgen Vatne-Freidnes, the chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee in Oslo, said that Machado was honored for the tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. The committee hailed her as one of the most extraordinary examples of the civilian courage in Latin America in recent times, noting that she has been forced to live in hiding in the past year.
Who stood up against the dictatorship in the elections of 2020.
The Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa has launched a digital payment system to cut the transaction costs by allowing the businesses to settle deals in local currencies. COMESA, which has 21 member states, including Egypt, Kenya and Ethiopia, joins the efforts by the African continent to push for the local currency payment systems to cut the trade costs by eliminating the need to convert the local currencies into hard currencies for the cross-border payments. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli led the Egyptian delegation at the summit of the Common Market for East and South African countries, the COMESA, which took place in Nairobi, Kenya. Oil prices fell slightly as the investors weighed a ceasefire deal in Gaza that could ease the Middle East tensions against the stalled peace talks in Ukraine. The U.S. crude futures fell $1.04 to settle at $61.51 a barrel, and the Brent declined $1.03 to settle at $65.22. And this brings us to the end of the news bulletin for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.